any successful story involves any successful entrepreneur, any person that has achieved any amount of significant wealth, like anybody in the top, let's say 5% of wealth in the US, I can almost guarantee went through some sort of struggle, some sort of sacrifice they made.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Remote Investor. My name is Craig Curelop, and today we have a very special guest. One of the OGs of house hacking, the author of the book, The House Hacking Strategy, How to Use Your Home to Achieve Financial Freedom, and the host of the Investify podcast. Today we have Craig Curelop on. Mike talks with Craig about his journey investing in real estate, starting out from humble beginnings and struggling to get to where he is today. You'll have to forgive me, I messed up Mike's audio. I did my best to repair it, so hopefully it's bearable. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Let's jump in.
Craig Curelop, what's going on, man? How are you?
Michael, thanks so much for having me on the show, man. I'm doing great. Thanks. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Dude, I'm so excited to talk to you. It's totally my pleasure. So for anyone that doesn't know your story, give us your quick background and bio, if you would.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Craig Curelop. I am the founder of the FI team, a team of investor-friendly real estate agents, primarily focused in Denver, Idaho, and California, but always looking to potentially expand. I've got a rental portfolio of about 26 units consisting of single family and duplexes, as well as some syndications as well. And yeah, author of a book called The House Hacking Strategy. And so, all things real estate.
I love it, dude. And it's so funny, like the FI team is something that we've needed in the space for such a long time, like investor-friendly agents. I can't tell you how many, better than most probably, how many agents you talk to, you talk about cap rate and they're like, what? Huh?
Yep.
So I'm curious, like what made you want to start that group?
I needed an investor-friendly agent in the Denver area, and there were some out there, kind of, sort of, but they didn't really help out nearly as much as I thought was possible. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get my license. And then the next time, it was really actually just to do my own deals. And so I got my license, did my own deal. And then in 2019, I helped out a buddy buy his first house hack. I helped him find the place. I helped him analyze it. I helped him run the numbers. I gave him contractors, all that good stuff. And then I made, like $10,000, and that was like, wow, that was the most fun $10,000 I ever made.
Yeah, totally.
And so I was like, I could do that again. And then I just started doing it again and again and again and again. And I just started helping all these people out. And in my first year, I did over 100 deals. And so it was like, yeah, my real estate agent story is not one that's very common. And I was like, okay, well, I can't continue to do this. I either need to quit or I need to build a team. And so that's when the FI team was birthed, and we became Denver's number one agent group for investor-friendly realtors.
No way. So you were working at a regular full-time job and doing this on the side, and you're like, there's no way I can continue doing both.
Right. So when I first started in 2019, I was working at a small company called Bigger Pockets that you might have heard of. And I was just, I was doing 2 deals a month, like part-time, making, so that's like $20,000 a month, just part-time.
Yeah.
And I was making much less than that at Bigger Pockets, as you can imagine.
You're right.
And I was like, I love you guys, but I can't stay here.
Doesn't make sense.
And so I went full-time a few months later, and yeah, that's how I was able to do the 100 in the first 12 months.
Dude, I love it. So you mentioned this term house hacking, and that's really what I want to focus on and drill down into in this episode. So for anyone that's not familiar, give us the quick and dirty. What is a house hack?
So a house hack is when you buy a 1 to 4 unit property with a low % down loan, typically 3 to 5% down. But of course, there's some 0% down loan options if you live out in the sticks or if you're a veteran. And the requirement for all of those loans is that you need to live there for at least 1 year. And so you buy the house with almost no money down. You live there for a year. While you're living there, you're renting out the rooms or the other units. So it's, offsetting or maybe even totally eliminating your mortgage expense. And then you're able to save up and buy the next one a year later. In the process of doing that again and again and again, house hacking every single year, it builds tremendous amounts of wealth pretty systematically.
I love it. And what do you say to people that are like, I don't want to live with roommates, or I don't want to be living next door to my tenants?
So there's many ways to do this. I would say the first thing I would always say is you need to live uncomfortably. Any successful story involves any successful entrepreneur, any person that has achieved any amount of significant wealth, like anybody in the top, let's say 5% of wealth in the US, I can almost guarantee went through some sort of struggle, some sort of sacrifice they made. I made a sacrifice by sleeping on a curtain for a year, behind a curtain for a year, right, in my living room. Michael, I'm sure you've made some sacrifices, and I know you
Yes.
have because
Yeah.
we interviewed you on our podcast. Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
I'm like, it all came back to me. Yeah, and so like you have like if you're wanting to be successful and you're wanting to achieve the upper echelon of wealth, you have to be willing to do what the other 95% of people are not willing to do. And so find something like that that will benefit you tremendously wealth wise and go do it. And so the easiest thing to do is live in a 5 or 6 bedroom house, live in one bedroom and rent out the others. If you're single or just like dating, not married, there is absolutely no reason you should not be doing that. Like you're kidding yourself if you think you deserve more than that, because you don't unless you're able to buy a house with 20% down. And so that's my first thought. And if you think that was too harsh, I would say, okay, well, you can find a property. They're much more rare, but they're out there where you've got a single family house with a detached additional dwelling unit. You can live in one of the houses and rent out the other. You probably won't fully cover your mortgage, but at least you'll offset some of the costs. And then you'll be on your way. But better than not buying, but still, I think like you really got to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation as soon as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's drill down into your situation that you were sleeping behind the curtain, because I know a bit about it from having read your book and having chatted with you. But tell everybody a bit about it.
Yeah, so I bought my first duplex in 2017 in Denver. It was a mile and a half away from the office in a neighborhood that is essentially like the next neighborhood over from where the Path of Progress was happening. So I figured it was only a matter of time before my neighborhood was the Path of Progress neighborhood. And so I bought this.
But in 2017, Craig, like house hacking wasn't a thing, right? It wasn't being talked about, or was it in your world?
It was. So this is what house hacking was in 2017, and I'll tell you like the origin of how house hacking started. So Brandon Turner, who most of you guys know, he's not the founder of Bigger Pockets, but he's made Bigger Pockets of what it is.
Yeah.
He wrote a blog post called "How to Hack Your Housing and Live for Free." In 2013, he wrote that post. And so that's how house hacking came to be. But the only way he described it was buying a 2, 3, or 4 unit property, living in one unit and renting out the other. We didn't have all this Airbnb, rent by the room, split houses. Like now there's like a million different ways to skin this cat.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, that's the only way that I knew. So that's why I bought a duplex.
Okay,
I honestly I almost could have done better without buying the duplex, honestly. But that's what I knew. So I bought this duplex, and the only way to make this property cash flow was if I slept in, if I put up a curtain in a cardboard box in the living room and rented my bedroom out on Airbnb. And so for most days, probably 28 to 30 of the 31 days in a month, I had my bedroom rented out. And even when it wasn't rented out, I didn't sleep there because I didn't want to have to make the bed again. So I was legitimately living behind the curtain.
And this is a 1 bedroom, 1 bath, each side of the duplex?
Yep. And it's actually up down. So
up down. Okay. Yep. So the other unit, was that rented out on Airbnb also, or was that a full-time tenant, or what did you do with that?
That was full-time. So that top unit was rented full-time, and then my room was rented out on Airbnb.
Okay. And I'm just curious, like, what was that top unit rented for on a monthly basis? And then what were you making on average in terms of that other unit or your room that you're renting? Do you recall?
Yeah. So the top was rented out for $1,750. The bottom, or the bottom, which was my room, was on average, because it's Airbnb, very cyclical, was $1,100 a month over the course of a year.
Perfect. And what was like your all-in PITI housing payment?
It was $2,200 until I refinanced, and then I refinanced and went down to $1,800.
Amazing. So you're basically killing it already you could have in theory lived in that other room and just had a minor housing payment, but you're like, no, I want to live for free. I want to get paid to own this thing and sleep on a futon behind this curtain. And so you were killing.
Yeah, I was pretty determined to cash flow. And funny enough, this was like pretty intentional that I knew this was going to be part of my story. And I was like, oh, like, how do I make the story sound so crazy so that in like 6 or 7 years, I can look back on this and be like, I can't believe like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you make yourself stand out so that way someone will remember, people will remember you. And so that's like another piece of it too. It is like, I kind of had that foresight for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, this is like the epitome of type 2 fun, right? In the
Uh-huh.
moment, you're like, yeah, this kind of sucks. But looking back, you're like, oh, that was amazing. I'm so glad I did this.
Yeah. Yeah. And most days, the thing is it wasn't that bad. Like,
I was
I
going to
mean,
ask.
I mean, you ever sleep on a futon before? Like they're pretty comfortable,
Yeah.
you know?
I know there's
I
some
mean,
really good ones out there.
yeah. And don't get me wrong, I did not have a good one. I spent like
Yeah.
$150. But like, yeah. But there are good ones out there if you wanted to do that. But I was a single guy. I recognize, like, I just recognize my life situation of like, I'm a single 24-year-old guy. Yeah, I was 24. I was like, there's never going to be a time in my life where I'm going to be okay living behind a curtain. The minute I meet a girl, this goes out the window. So I might as well try to get some wealth generated and started with the little wealth that I had right now, get the highest possible return. And that way, in a few years, when I do meet the girl, we can live in the house of our dreams. And all this stuff kind of adds up.
Yeah. Was there anything that occurred in that point, in that time when you were doing this, that was so traumatic or so difficult? You're like, I would have done this differently. Or now looking back, knowing where you are, you're like, nope, I'm glad I did everything I did.
I'm glad I did everything I did is a short answer. There were nights that were harder than others for sure. But again, like I said, probably less than 2% of the nights were bad.
Okay.
And so when you're just kind of like, most people are just chill. They come in, they want a place to crash. They're going to be in and out and they're quiet.
That was
It's
what I
just
was
like, yeah.
that was just going to ask, like, do you have any insane stories of people you met on Airbnb and you're like, ah, shoot, like I shouldn't have approved this booking because now my night is over.
So anyone that was just like a couple staying for a couple nights, I don't recall any bad things happening. The one mistake I made is that I let one guy, I was afraid over the winter in Denver because trip bookings usually drop pretty good.
Yeah.
I let this one guy do basically a medium-term rental before medium-term rentals existed.
Okay.
And he rented it out for January, February, March.
Okay.
And so he was getting a little bit too comfortable in the place, I'd say. He would have friends over. Mind you, this is like a 600 square foot place, right? Like, he would have friends over, and he would. So the worst night of all living there, which is the funniest story, is it was Super Bowl. It was a Super Bowl night. 2000, It was 18, I think, or whatever. Basically, the Patriots were playing the Eagles, and I'm a pretty big Patriots fan. At least I was when they were good.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, straight up bandwagon fan. I'll take my Sundays back. But yeah, so the Patriots lost that Super Bowl, right? So I was already like kind of upset and kind of in a crummy mood. And of course, when the Patriots lose, the rest of the world is very happy. And so these guys come back very, very like excited. They're totally hammered. He's got a dog, and him and his friend literally is passed out on my kitchen floor, and he's like 6'4". Like, this dude's not small, so he's literally taking up the whole kitchen floor. And then this guy who's living there and this girl he's been seeing are going at it in the bedroom, and it's very loud, and it's like 2 a.m, and I gotta work the next day. And then his dog is also like chewing on the squeaky toy, like at 2 a.m. And so I literally like, yeah, it was a rough night, let me tell you. But that was really the only really bad, rough night that I had. And I had a real conversation with him the next day that I was like, dude, if you do that again, like, you're out. So.
And was he cool about it? Or was it then weird, like, for the rest of his time there?
He was understanding and he was cool about it. But I can't say that we were like we were not friends. After that, and we weren't really friends before that either. But we definitely weren't friends after that.
That's understandable. That's understandable. Yeah. All right, and then so during this time, Craig, like, and you said, "Oh, if I meet a girl, then I can bring her. We could move into the house of our dreams." Like, so were you actively dating or open to the idea of dating because you knew what your current living situation was, or did you kind of put that on hold to focus more on this wealth generation?
No, I was still kind of dating, like just going on the apps and just seeing people. And Yeah, like it was. I mean, it was fine. I lived like a normal 24-year-old. I have to say, I think during that time I didn't drink or anything like that. So maybe not a super normal 24-year-old, but like I still had a social life for sure.
Okay. So doing this is not mutually exclusive of also having a social life. This didn't consume your life or ability to be a social person.
No, no. I mean, we were hiking every weekend, climbing 14ers. I was going out on dates or whatever. And yeah, for
Love
sure. I
it.
had friends. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. So for anybody listening that's thinking about house hacking, it's like, oh man, like I got to do what Craig did to get where Craig is. And like, I have to sacrifice everything else. I think to a degree, like you can have your cake and eat it too, is what it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, there was like some things I was willing to sacrifice, like my living situation, and some things that I wasn't. Like, I mean, in my social life, honestly, I didn't spend much money. Like I was spending under $1,000 a month. And it was, I didn't have a rent payment. I rode my bike to work. Like I was just like, everything was just so dialed in at that time. And I was so passionate about hitting financial independence as soon as I could that, I was just every dollar counted in my head. And so I think when you have that mentality and you kind of become obsessed with something, like you're just going, there's nothing that's going to stop you.
Nothing goes, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm curious, like, because you operate DeFi team in California and in Colorado, in Denver specifically, both are kind of high cost of living markets. So are you encountering people that are like, oh, I can't get the numbers to work because I'm not going to cover my entire mortgage payment with house hacking? It's not for me.
So it's going to be very difficult for you to buy a duplex with 5% down and live in one unit, rent out the other unit, and cash flow. Like it's just not going to happen. And so if you're going to go in with that expectation, you just don't even look because you're going to waste your time.
Yeah.
However, Denver can work in that if you buy a large enough single family home and you live in one room and rent out, 5 or 6 other rooms, you can cash flow. Even with today's market, in today's rates, with today's prices, you absolutely can cash flow. And I just think it's such an important time to be buying real estate because very few other people are. And that's where all the money is made, is when like people, when there's blood in the streets. And so buy, hold, when rates drop, prices will pop. And that's when you're going to want to own real estate for sure.
Dude, I love it. I love it. So how do you think about like the math in these high cost living markets? Like I live in California. I house hacked as well. You were definitely an inspiration for me to do that. And so how do you get people to think about the math? I'm like, oh, well, rent is this much. And now maybe I'm paying more than rent. Like, how does that work for you?
So very, very rarely can you find a place, if you're renting out the rooms, you will always pay less than rent. It's just a matter of will you cash flow or not. And the way I look at it is when you're paying rent, you're paying 100% interest. When you're paying a mortgage, right now it's 6 or 7% interest. All things considered, that's not that bad. Like you have to remember, like a lot of your payment is gonna, more in the beginning is gonna go towards interest, but a lot of your payment is still principal. And so even though you're paying it, you are still building wealth by paying down that principal.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. As you're looking at potential house hacks for yourself and then for potential clients, do you look at basically forecasting a year out, say, okay, now you've moved out of the property. Now you have an additional room or unit to rent. What does the cash flow situation look like then?
I almost only analyze it that way. And so I analyze it as if the owner is going to pay themselves rent. Because for the fact of the matter is the more time that you're going to not live in the property, more time than you are going to live in the property if you do it right? Because you want to hold these things for a while. And so let's analyze it for the majority of the time that you're going to own it, and still at today's rent rates too, right? And but of course rents will go up over time. Your mortgage payment stays relatively the same, and it's a great way to make stuff happen.
And if it doesn't cash flow in year 2, does that mean it's a bad investment?
If it doesn't cash flow in year 2, you have to really make a decision. If you're a high income earner and you're okay swallowing a couple $100 a month to keep the property because you think appreciation is good, sure. I would say if you're a first time person, I would advise that you really want to try to figure out how to make that house work and at least break even if you're in a high appreciating market.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. One thing I see all the time and curious to get your thoughts, Craig, is I work with a lot of investors, do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and they're like, Michael, it's negative cash flow. It doesn't work. And I'm like, yeah, but let's dig in here. And it's negative cash flow by $20 a month. It's like, well, A, are we too conservative with our assumptions with regards to expenses? Or B, is there something we could do differently to create additional income streams or up the rent? Usually I find that there are, and we can make the deal work. What's your experience been like?
Well, I mean, if it's $20 a month, I would call that cash flow break even. Like, would you not take a house for $20? Like, I would, if you were like, Michael, Craig, I'm gonna give you a house and it's gonna cost you $20 a month to have that house. You cool with having it? I'd be like, yeah, I'll take it for sure. Right? I mean, you're telling me that, like, I mean, a Netflix subscription is like $20 a month, right? So,
right.
Like if it's, I think like where it really starts to get kind of tricky is like if you're in the, $300, $400, $500 a month loss, you have to think about, I mean, I've got a house right now that loses $900 a month because it's in a great area. I bought it with very low down and I've got really high hopes on the appreciation of the thing. So, you have to be strategic about it. Like, don't just go buy a house, but you got to have, if it doesn't cash flow, you got to have a pretty good reason.
Yeah. No, I think that makes total sense. And I would say one other thing to add for our listeners is like PMI is a very real thing, especially when you're using low down payments, right? And so after you have 20% equity in the house, if you can refinance, that in and of itself might turn that property into being cash flow positive.
Mm-hmm. Totally. 100%.
Awesome. Well, Craig, I know you wrote a book about this topic specifically. Tell us what readers could expect to find in it.
Yeah, so I wrote the house hacking strategy and Bigger Pockets published it. And so I have to imagine it's the #1 best-selling book on house hacking out there, but
without a doubt.
Yeah. I mean, that's not saying much. That's like those, I don't know if you're a baseball guy, but like it's playoff baseball season and they're always like, this is the first time in MLB playoff history that, a guy on a Saturday afternoon with a 70 temperature hot, like every sort of like, real detail. You're like, all right, dude, like that's not even surprising. So, but anyway, yeah. So in the book, basically it's a step-by-step guide, on how to actually handle your first house hack. I've heard multiple people come up to me and just say, hey, like I've just written so many notes in your book and I just kept referring back to it. And so, we're going to teach you kind of like high level what house hacking will do for your life. It teaches you what's the best area to buy, what's the best house to buy, what's the best renovations to make, how do you get the rooms filled, how do you screen the tenants, all the way to like, what lending products you use. Like I don't think I left any stone unturned in that book when I wrote it. Mind you, that was 5 years ago. So I would say there's probably some more stuff I know now that's not in the book. But I still say like 90% of that book is still, or what's in that book is still about 85 to 90% of what I know. Like if you just buy that book, you'll have a really, really good idea. And there might be just some modern day tweaks that you have to make.
Yeah. And I would say too, like for people house hacking, because you are living in the house, there are some personal touches and flares that you can put onto it that might make it work better for your personal living situation or in your particular market. So I think that Craig, you nailed the fundamentals in that book, like 10 out of 10, for sure.
For sure. Thanks, Michael. Yeah.
No, of course, dude. And where can people find it?
You can get it if you go to biggerpockets.com/house hack, I think. You can get it there. And then there's a whole bunch of bonus content you can get if you buy it through Bigger Pockets. Or you can buy it through Amazon if you just want the book and no special stuff with it.
Right on. And Craig, if people want to reach out to you, get connected with you, learn from you, work with the FI team in their market, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can hit me up on Instagram. I'm the FI guy. And also, if you want to work with us, thefiteam.com. And just hit that button, let's house hack or let's go, and we'll make it happen.
Right on. And Craig, last question before I let you out of here, dude. What's your favorite thing to have for lunch?
Last night's dinner. Does that count?
Yeah, that totally counts. That totally counts. Yeah. And smoking like a truly financially independent, focused person. I love it.
Yeah. Why cook the same meal twice? It's like watching the same movie twice. So
I love it. It. Well, Craig, thanks for hanging out with me, man. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much, man. It was good seeing you.
Likewise. Catch you later.
Yep.